Evening and welcome once again to Gaming Under the Influence. I'm Mike, here with Alex, coming to you from GreenDragonCVR in Woodbridge to talk about video games. How are you, pal?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm still playing the same games I was a month ago. Actually, which is Persona 3 Reload and First Berserker Kazan. And I'm enjoying both of them immensely. First Berserker is definitely one of the hardest Souls-likes that exists. One of my favorite too, I think. Right up there with
what a turnaround that game. We were talking trash about it right before it came out because we thought it was going to be
the
like
demo wasn't that impressive.
It
was very basic, but having spent a good 50 hours in it now, I can say it's incredible.
That's why you always gotta give it a shot, right?
Gotta give it a shot.
Yeah.
If it's in a genre you like, it's made by reputable people, then I'd say give it a shot. But
nice.
You know, if you don't want to cheese the game or put it on easy, you're gonna have a rough time with this one. That's for sure. Worth checking out though, for sure.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you? Playing anything?
I've been playing the same stuff too, just a little bit of noodling around in Super Mario RPG for some reason, and
it's cool.
I played a bit of Death Stranding, which is topical for today, but also the Oblivion remastered there, which is really cool if you're like nostalgic about it, you know, because old 360 game, but otherwise, yeah, it's just more Oblivion. I kind of fell into it because I was also playing Skyrim. I'm like literally all over the place, and you know what? I don't even care.
That's fine.
I'm just playing whatever the heck I want, whenever the heck I want. Yeah, that's about it.
I'd like to see a physical copy for the Oblivion one. And
yeah, that would be nice. I thought they were gonna launch with they showed off like the deluxe edition, and it looked like there was gonna be a physical version of at least either that or the standard, but there's been nothing yet, right?
There probably will one day.
Yeah, maybe.
Some markets don't have easy access to digital distribution yet, which is hard to believe.
True.
There's also weirdos like us who prefer physical media still to this day.
That's right.
But in any case, what with all the Death Stranding 2 information that I saw pouring out of every media outlet today.
Yeah.
You know, which by the way looks really good.
It does. It looks really incredible, not only just visually, but you know, literally everything else.
What they're representing, the world building and the ideas it's going to contain are no doubt going to be as impressive as the first. But it got me thinking, you know, about what made the first one so special. Because I think, you know, since the first moment I played it, actually, that it's one of the best games ever made, easily.
Yeah, I remember actually we booted up together for the first time.
Yeah, in 2019.
We sat there just kind of in awe, like, what the heck is this, right?
There's nothing like a Kojima game.
Yeah.
Still, you know.
That goes without saying. Yeah, he's got some wild ideas that it seems like almost nobody else would touch.
Yeah.
Out of, you know, just, I don't know, like, it's so outlandish. Maybe, like, you know, you're playing it and you think, like, this guy had the balls to put all this stuff in this game, you know, with, like, supernatural elements baked into a game that otherwise looks like it takes place in America or a futuristic,
it does actually, in America,
you know, broken down America. Like, it's just
he's got a unique,
crazy
flair in respect of all of the elements that comprise a video game, in my opinion. You know, we've talked before about the necessity of an author with a clear vision behind a game in order for it to be, you know, in order for it to have some merit, to be more than a plaything,
right,
an entertainment device.
Yeah, you need somebody with the idea that, you know, runs behind the whole thing, right? And not just
there's a few people out there whose ideas I respect and value above all other creators in video games, but Kojima's close to the top of the list, and I think Death Stranding is where he had free reign to just be himself and do exactly what he wanted. Yeah. And what made the game unique from a material standpoint, in my opinion, is that, you know, he had AAA tools at his disposal.
Yeah.
Huge budget. And he had the ability to make a game like the one he made, which is not really something that you see in the AAA space, because, you know, we were just talking about how most games developed at that budget with that kind of tech are they're made by what we call suit dummies.
Yeah, right? Or at the very least, you know, have publishers arguing with the creative guys, and they're needing to make concessions or some kind of compromises.
That's right.
Ultimately limiting, you know, the creative guys. There's always some kind of thing like that going on, and it seems like, you know, Kojima's in a very unique position, like we've said in the past, that he kind of is in charge of. He
has both creative and financial control of his own production pipeline there. Yeah.
Exactly. So
it's also interesting though that he's working with what I think is, you know, easy to classify as Western AAA development technology, right? He's using the engine from
the Decima engine. He gets a lot of support from, I guess, what is it, Guerrilla
Yeah,
Guerrilla Studios.
Because
I think
the people who made Horizon there.
Yeah. I think they are in charge of that engine, or they created it.
They did create it, yeah.
Right?
They made it for Horizon, and it's a beautiful engine.
So obviously he gets help from them, and he has access to, you know, that engine and tools to make this, you know, AAA thing. But
oftentimes when you're playing Japanese games with unique ideas, they're made with technology that doesn't, you know, at least in terms of its raw material power, match up to that kind of stuff that these...
True. And we talk about that stuff and why it's, you know, even
why it
preferred.
It
can be a good thing,
yeah.
yes. But in this situation, it's just, I guess, it's extra special that he gets to make these crazy, you know, this crazy game with these crazy ideas and do it on the AAA scale with this slick presentation, you know, nice.
I think that's the entry point to this game. You know, you got this unique meeting of worlds.
Yeah.
Japanese creative flair with like Western technological and financial aptitude.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else really like Death Stranding. It doesn't exist, buddy. No game that looks that good and costs that much is like that game.
Yeah, there's
easy to
nothing
say.
out there like
we
that.
could just, you know, maybe it's opportune time to explore why that is the case a little bit, both in terms of the ideas in the game and the kind of gameplay loop it thrusts you into that most people, when it first came out, were a little off-put by, if I recall.
Oh, for sure. It definitely, you know, I guess had a little bit of a barrier of entry that, you know, also kind of unfolds slowly, especially over the course of the beginning of the game. So that kind of deterred people probably right off the bat.
Yeah. You remember when it came out
really
and
getting into it, right?
People were calling it a walking sim.
Yeah.
Which I guess in a way it is.
In a way, yeah, sure.
It is a travel simulator, I guess.
Yeah, you're going from point A to point B most of the time, right?
Yeah. But what makes it unique, I think, Death Stranding, is the way that exploration and traversal are the core element of the game.
Yeah.
Whereas in other games, you know, you travel around, of course, in open world games like The Witcher or Horizon, you spend a lot of time moving about.
Right.
But that's in service to other elements of the gameplay loop. You know, I remember listening to the people who made The Witcher 3 talk about how they had this 30-second rule where they wouldn't have more than 30 seconds between combat events or meeting some NPC out on the road or something like this, right? There was traversal, it was through open spaces, but that was to convey the sense of the world's largeness and not because getting around was the point of the game.
Right.
And Death Stranding kind of inverts that, right?
Yeah, I was going to say it definitely kind of flips that on its head, right?
In Death Stranding, you know, for people who are unfamiliar with the idea, you're Sam Porter Bridges and you're a porter whose job it is to deliver packages between like isolated communities in post-apocalyptic America, right?
Yeah.
Which has been invaded by these ghost-like entities called BTs from the world of the dead, essentially.
Yeah.
You know?
I think they're not able to pass fully to the afterlife.
There was an event, the Death Stranding, where these ghost-like beings called BTs beached things. They became stuck in the real world, and you know, for various reasons, the big one being when the stuff from the other side, the dark matter or whatever it is, comes into contact with living matter or stuff in the real world, there's like a giant explosion. You know? So when the Death Stranding happened, there was a bunch of explosions all over the world, and people thought it was nuclear terrorism or like meteorites or something. But then they figured out quickly it was people dying and their ghosts coming into contact with stuff in the world and causing explosions. So this is another one of the ways where the game, you know, it's kind of flips the well-known Western open world game loop on its head, right? Because in most games you're traveling around to get to the next combat encounter, but here there's an active, the game actively discourages you from engaging in fatal gunplay in any case.
Yeah, combat's difficult, and early on you don't really have many options.
You have incentive to run away.
Nothing,
actually, but the interesting thing is if you kill another human being in the game with lethal weaponry, it causes a void out, you know, causes a giant explosion that potentially destroys travel infrastructure that you built to ease your passage across the map. So
you don't want to do that at any point in the game, really.
Yeah, I really don't. I spent most of the game avoiding lethal combat and focusing on building cool infrastructure.
Which is funny, because then it plays right into Kojima's sort of style of gameplay where you can critically, like, you know, think about how you're going to approach situations, and you have tools to dispose of, you know, your enemies or whatever. Non-lethally, exactly, right?
Ways, yeah.
So
I remember most of his games discourage lethal combat. Is that not the case? Yeah. I played in the past couple of years Metal Gear 3 and 5, and in both cases there was some incentive to do things differently.
Sort of makes your life easier that way, right? Rather than going in guns blazing.
Yeah. Sometimes I guess it was easier in 5 to go in guns blazing, but you didn't get to see either the full story or you
5 would have been the only one that like kind of even gave you more of the option. Yeah.
That's right.
As like a viable way to do it.
Yeah. But it's still, you got bad rankings and
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I remember there being some story elements where you couldn't use lethal options if you wanted to see some part of the ending, if I'm not
that's
mistaken.
an interesting way to do it too.
But Death Stranding is really cool for that. You know, the fact that traversal is the core gameplay element and everything else is in service to it. You know, there's also heavy cinematic storytelling, but we can get to that in a minute. In terms of like raw gameplay, I think traveling across the world for extended periods of time through these like vast open spaces that resemble like Iceland or something like that.
Yeah, it looks like
mountains and grass, no trees, right? Like just cloudy skies. That's what I think of when I think of that game.
It helps that it's definitely a beautiful world, right? Like and part of it is just the exploration, and like it's
you spend so much time traveling across the world and walking, actually balancing your character.
But it also
like
it doesn't it's not just. It's kind of unfair to call it a walking simulator in the sense that there's the traversal is not just, it's not like you're just walking.
Yeah, walking's like really right at the beginning. You want to stop walking eventually, right?
Yeah. And also the terrain that you're navigating sometimes gets really difficult. You need to use things to get around. Like you have ladders and you have ropes and all kinds of tools, right? And then as you go, obviously you unlock more and more tools, and then like
zip lines and roads.
Yeah, eventually you're barely even walking. It gets to a point where you're flying around that map, right?
Yeah. So exciting.
It's such a rewarding experience over the time too, right? It's
the gameplay progression. That's what it consists in, really. Like instead of leveling up your character and getting more powerful guns, which I guess you do over time.
Yeah, you do.
But the main thing is how your first couple of treks across this huge map.
Really like struggling.
You're struggling and stuff's falling off and your packages are getting ruined and stuff. Then by the end of the game, as you progress, you can build roads between the major cities that you visit in the game, and even connect the like outlying hermitages of all these like side characters to your travel network. So by the end of the game, you're like either blasting across the roads you built, these floating like ghostly roads, using motorbikes and trucks and stuff, or you're literally like using zip lines to fly across mountains. It's so satisfying because the first time you cross that mountain, you have to walk and place that zip line.
You pretty much start from one end of the map and the whole game takes place like going across all the way to the other side
and back, actually.
And the good thing is, as you're connecting those zones, the things that require battery and stuff like that will eventually be connected to the network. So then even stuff like that, you can, like the skeletal legs that help you run and walk, or like just vehicles in general that run on batteries, like eventually all that stuff just works, like connected to the network. You have charging zones everywhere and stuff. So part of it is also that it makes the traversal so much easier. And then, the really roads, the zip lines, the whatever else. There's even some extra stuff they added in the director's cut that we probably both haven't experienced yet.
I haven't yet.
Yeah.
I would love to check that out before 2 comes out, but
I'm playing it now, but I'm only like maybe 10 to 15 hours in, so I haven't seen some of the new stuff that they added.
It's a massive game. Unless you're going to dump like 4 hours a day into it before the end of the next month, it's probably hard to finish it before, but I'd like to, and it's because of this, really. Like such an engaging game, unique in that respect,
Yeah, I was saying before, like it's so easy to sit down and just jump into because it's just easy to get into the loop and start playing it, and it feels good. You feel like you're accomplishing,
It's so funny too that
things
it's like
and advancing the story. It's not like playing, like for me anyway, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and just getting the overwhelming sense of like I don't want to do all this garbage.
Sure. You even get the sense that like even though it's a huge game and there's lots to do, like every little bit that you do it's like self-contained. Your journey from here to there can be satisfying.
Yeah, exactly. You can even do it in bursts if you want. Sit down and just do a quick 20 minutes and then like
I don't think I can recall, like I can think of many games. We talked about this so many times where the way that your movement across the virtual space is augmented over the course of the game. That forms a core element of the progression. But here, that is this central element of it. And
it's kind of like baked right down into it, right?
That's the main gameplay element. And for me, that's what really makes it stand out. It's so satisfying to just be this like humble like bum walking across the map at first, and you're stuck in every river and crevice. And then by the end of it, you have these like floating roads and zip lines that take you everywhere in just a span of minutes.
You're even well equipped, so even if shit does go down, you're ready for it.
And the enemies you would flee from before, now you're ready to take them on. There is combat, and it's even good. Like I remember the boss encounters, of which there are quite a few, like pretty fun.
That's right. Yes.
The enemy design is beautiful, and the boss fights you do engage in are super cool. Man.
And they're not like a walk in the park either.
No.
You have to struggle a little bit.
Shooting combat. They really pulled that off. It feels good. But even enemy camps that you could raid for supplies that you ultimately take and use to build your roads and stuff like that. Isn't that great?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool how they took the open world genre and kind of flipped it on its head. Now the point is the traversal, not the combat or whatever else that it's going to serve.
Yeah, for me, like I'm not really big on open world games. In fact, I don't like them. And this, like you said, inverts it. Instead of giving you a huge map and then putting things out of the way to explore, or like kind of give you a loose reason to explore. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but other open world games, they do it differently, and it feels like you're doing, BS like collectathons.
Yeah. It's filler
to see the whole map or whatever. And this game is the core, loop and service, like everything you do is...
It's the point. The open world is the point. Like engaging with the open spaces is exactly the point.
So
they're not like an
exploration
impediment to the game. They're the reason that it exists.
It's natural, right? You're just doing it because that's the game. Like I
really like that element.
It feels good. And then this is all without even getting into the the actual narrative of the game. There's so much. There's so many cutscenes. By the end of it, there's like a movie at the end of it.
7 hours worth of
classic MGS4 scenario where the ending is like a movie. You just sit back and just watch it.
I remember the night I finished it was like 11 p.m. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna finish this game. And like the last there was like 2.5 hours of just like raw.
Finishing a Kojima game is like sitting down and watching like a Lord of the Rings movie. You need time.
You need a lot of time. Never would have thought, but
between the the gameplay sections that you have to play and then the cutscenes in between, like it's crazy.
It is crazy.
But it's something of an experience. Like
it is an experience.
For me, the first time I finished, I think it was Metal Gear Solid 2, and I was young enough to not understand anything going on, and now I'm old enough that I still don't understand practically. And it's just, but that experience like stayed with me. I remember finishing that game, and I went to bed that night, and it changed like video games forever for me. You kind of get the same thing in playing Death Stranding. It's like, wow, like, this is nuts.
The plot in all the games tends to be, I guess, to be critical, somebody would call it convoluted, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, that it's elaborate. And
in
a lot
some
of
ways, I
feed into each other. A lot of characters, like this can be a good thing, especially, to me, like the point of all that stuff, rather, to me, all that stuff has to have a point. If it's just like a poorly written fantasy novel where there's just a bunch of proper nouns that describe things that are intended to catch your attention for a moment or exemplify a genre trope, it's dismissible, then I'm not really into that, But in the case of Kojima, like all of this stuff, as in all of his other games, like in Metal Gear especially, Metal Gear 5 and 3, the ones I played most recently. There's a lot of this too, a lot of names and events and stuff always being referenced. It's sort of cryptic, and it's in the way it introduces these things to you. But it always seems to me to be in service of conveying Kojima's like strange, strange like spiritual interpretation of American cinematic tropes and stuff like that. You see like American technology and military personnel. And like stuff that you would expect to see in like, war movies and science fiction movies and stuff like that. But here it's like in Death Stranding, it's about how people, encounter death in a new way, essentially. How they survive after death, and his unique metaphysical interpretation of the human soul and all this stuff, right? So just like with the other games, I guess there's the way in which, like, just like in Persona, there's how like radical otherness, like weird stuff starts to bleed into normal stuff. Here, like the normal stuff is cinematic tropes we're familiar with, American technology and science fiction, but the weird stuff starts kind of bursting out of that here, literally, right?
There's always
that's what makes it interesting. That supernatural flair. And it's about here how like there's these, we can't recount the entire plot, but all of this stuff is about how the world ends because people are hurtling towards their own death, the finality of their existence,
the extinction events and everything. There's so much going on, like you said, and it at times it feels convoluted, but once you sort of get to the end and wrap it all up, it's like, oh my god, it's hard not to feel like overwhelmed practically.
I don't think even it definitely incredible. It's convoluted in the sense that there's lots going on and lots to even remember.
I don't even mean to say it as a detriment. I know you didn't either, right? It's just that there's a lot going on. If you're playing it like not every night or every other night and you sort of lose track of what time, you might get confused, like if you're not really
you might get confused about certain plot elements, but all those are in service to this view of reality and human nature that the guy's trying to convey. And I think that like even when you don't remember exactly who this guy is or that guy is, that part still remains crystal clear to you, right? And there's like this whole like motif of people engaging with death in this like empirical scientific way in this game, you know, a bunch of people trying to figure out exactly what's going on and how the spiritual and the material interpenetrate and can be manipulated and used for like mundane things, how the mundane relates to the spiritual and all this stuff. It's really cool. And at the end, Sam ends up becoming something of a savior by deferring the extinction event thanks to his personal relationship with the extinction entity there. So yeah,
weird stuff, and it really like
satisfying. Yeah, really satisfying presentation using these like familiar American cinematic tropes of a totally alien view of reality and of human nature.
Yeah,
and of mortality and all this stuff. So that's really what's unique about it to me. Like, not only is the gameplay awesome and itself unique, like we just described, but it's in service to this vision that makes engaging with it for 80 hours worth your time.
Well, definitely. Yeah, it's very satisfying.
Not unlike reading a great novel or something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna compare it to that actually. It's like reading a novel, right?
In that sense, Kojima, like, you know, people like talk about how he has this like arrogance to his there's an arrogance to his games, like he thinks he's all that, but in a sense he is actually.
Maybe,
you know, can you find somebody else who makes anything like that?
You know what? Yeah, like I'd be hard pressed to say, you know, he's wrong or he's a jackass for thinking that. I mean, look, like play the game and tell me you've
people said like the that, inclusion of these themes signified it. I remember reading about this, like, who does this guy think he is, making these games about death and human nature and pontificating on the nature of existence? Like, whoa. Like, are we supposed to think that's a bad thing?
Sounds a lot like you're jealous, man. I don't know. Like,
sounds like just the word for ambition, artistic and otherwise, right? Like, and I'm glad that somebody's doing it.
Yeah,
and that they have the resources to do it well.
I wish more people would, but
probably they don't. They can, you know, nobody's ever going to be, at least in our lifetime, in the position that this guy is to do that.
Yeah, especially nowadays, there's no way. And it's crazy to say, like, there's a sequel coming out this month, and all this kind of leads up to that. Like, what's the second game gonna
Think about
be
everybody
like?
else, man. Think about how, like, you know, who comparable figures out there in the world, like Hironobu Sakaguchi had to leave Square Enix because he was in a bad position relative to the business interests. Sam Lake at Remedy owns like 2% of the stock. You can't really do much without people's approval, right? Like,
that's right, yeah.
The Hauser brothers are gone from Rockstar. Who's left? There's nobody like that. This guy owns his own company. He's got the keys to the kingdom. Everybody's like, all right, just take the money, take the tech, just make what you like, man, whatever.
It's true, yeah.
Nobody's got that position, right? Even Miyazaki he works for somebody at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, in the last couple of weeks and maybe months, Miyazaki has shown where FromSoft is kind of heading, and right now it's not looking good.
He did say that they're going to keep making their traditional games, so that's good. But I'm not thrilled with the idea of them branching out either. I don't think somebody with credibility should branch out like that
too much, into
junk, right? Like, what is essentially junk? You know, it's simply not the same kind of thing. His other games are comparable to Kojima's, in my opinion, right? For all the reasons we just said. They have these idiosyncratic gameplay mechanics, and they're in service to this unique vision of reality and human nature. But I don't think a live service multiplayer game can be that, right? It's more like a chess set or a toy. It's designed to facilitate competition and social interaction, whereas this game is like a purely contemplative experience at the end of the day, right? Death Stranding. That's what makes it special, you know? So these two things, I think, like three things really. The huge budget and intense technology behind it. The way that they use that to make this gameplay loop that inverts all of our understandings of like the open world genre, and the way that's in service to his like strange metaphysic, strange view of reality and human nature, and the way that the spiritual and the material interpenetrate and affect our everyday lives. Like, this is what makes this game unique, you know, and it's worth revisiting in the month or so before the second one comes out if you have the time.
Definitely.
That's for sure.
And
I wish I could. Maybe I will. Let's see.
I mean, you might not get through all of it, but it might be worth even just jumping in to refresh a little bit.
Definitely would.
And
one of the most satisfying things ever was finishing that travel network, man. You know, if you didn't want to do that, the game would probably be much shorter, but like making sure every single place that you have to go is connected.
It's connected, yeah.
Such a good feeling. Such a good feeling.
That's like, you know, truly like completing it and being able to go anywhere quickly. And
there's a part at the end of the game where you got to go all the way back across the country. And it helps that you have a travel network, although they do make you walk at some points and stuff.
Probably encounter some BTs or whatever. You know, there's still some combat and stuff like that, but
there's a lot of
there's a lot of it by the end of the game. There's boss fights too.
There is great boss fights. But again, like, it's all secondary to the fact that you're a porter, you're traveling and delivering junk to people, you know. And even the way that like the idea that it's a walking simulator is more profoundly true than people have any idea, right?
Yeah.
Like, not only do you have to walk, you have to like balance your walking.
That's the other
things
thing.
on your
like
back.
the
Like,
environment you're traversing through is not just like a flat ground, right? It's tough to.
they have a
manage,
mechanic
right?
to literally balance left or right.
Yeah,
like,
or else you'll fall over and damage the stuff you're delivering.
the most detailed walking simulator ever made. You know. Yeah, it's and
scan the environment,
music, the visuals. Like, you know,
that's
those you get to the end of a mission and you cross a giant hill and the sun starts coming up and some pop song starts
comes
playing.
on. It's just
feels
like
so good, man.
mesmerizing.
Such a great package.
Oh yeah. If you haven't played it, now's the time because number 2 is around the corner and it's coming fast.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out in preparation for the second, and it's probably cheap now too.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I know that a number of people who initially were put off by this game, a number of people we both know personally, like they got around to playing and they're like, man,
I think a lot of people had to eat their words about this game once they actually played it.
Yeah, it's strange. It reviewed not that well for a game like this. It got like 8s, even some 7s.
Yeah.
Remember people like memeing it on YouTube and dressing up in like costumes with stuff stacked on their back and walking around the city. It was a great time.
It's definitely, I mean, critically, it's aged well in the sense that people have, more people have gotten their hands on it and have realized, and
critical evaluation has gone up. For
exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So give it a shot.
Yeah, give it a shot if you get into it. And I'm looking forward to the second. Hope we'll be back to talk about that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you guys very much and take care.
Yeah.